That day, the skies were not dark, yet the whole world suddenly drowned in a night of despair. The news of Ozzy Osbourne's passing didn't just descend, it tore through the chest of humanity like a silent explosion, a wound that would never heal, louder than any sound he had ever created, because this time, what he left behind was not music, but an absolute stillness, frozen, unredeemable. For over 5 decades, he wasn't merely a voice. He was the scream of forgotten souls, the flickering flame that burned in the hearts of those who had fallen yet still endured. At 76, the Prince of Darkness bowed for the final time, not beneath roaring guitars nor beneath the glow of stage lights, but into a silence so staggering it felt as though the universe held its breath as millions of hearts shattered. Yet there was one soul whose grief cut even deeper than the world's, Sharon. She was not just his wife. She was the silent witness to every collapse, every rise from the deepest pit. She was the one who embraced that torn and tortured spirit with all the tenderness of a fearless heart. Her sorrow was not for the man on stage, but for the man who once whispered in the quiet of night, "As long as you're here, I won't let go." Before we begin, let us take a moment of silence, not to say goodbye, but to thank the man who turned pain into music and turned darkness into hope for an entire generation of the lost. And as the stage lights slowly dimmed, as the electric guitars faded into faint echoes like a dying memory, people truly began to hear Ozzy Osbourne's screams, not with their ears, but with their hearts. He didn't scream to shock, he screamed to survive. From the moment he was born in a poorhouse in Birmingham, fate had already branded him with the mark of being forgotten. A child lost too soon, imprisoned at 17, dismissed, mocked, and discarded by the powerful elites of the music industry. But Ozzy didn't climb to the top like other artists. He crawled with a broken body through cuts, blood, and fear. He didn't have the look of a star. He wasn't trained. Yet every time he stepped on stage with Black Sabbath, the pain of a generation found its voice. He didn't perform, he confessed. No pretense, no embellishment. Moments that stunned the world, like the infamous bat-biting incident in 1982, were never theatrics. They were simply Ozzy surviving the madness within himself. For him, the stage was a sanctuary, the last lifeline in a vast ocean of confusion. He sang with a bloodied throat, with a body weakened by surgery, through the days when Parkinson's stole every step. But he refused to stop. When asked why he kept going, he whispered, "Because I owe it to them." And you know what? He truly owed his fans, but they owed him too. Owed a man who had fallen countless times so they could stand. Owed a soul that burned to its core so they could glimpse the light amidst their own darkness. After nearly dying repeatedly from alcohol, drugs, and invisible sorrow, Ozzy rose in the 90s, not as a dark prince, but as a survivor, a nightmare that still sang. Hits like "No More Tears" were more than music. They were painful prayers from one who hit rock bottom, but still fought to swim upward. With Ozfest, he opened doors for society's outcasts, kids who once saw themselves as monsters and said, "I'm like you, but I'm still here." And when the reality show The Osbournes made him a household name, people saw a clumsy Ozzy, forgetting lyrics, laughing like a child, yet never forgetting the pain. He called himself a warning, not a role model. But it was precisely this brutal honesty that made him something no academy, accolade, or studio could ever create. A living icon of brokenness and resilience. His screams may have quieted now, but don't be mistaken. That is not the end. It is a ringing bell, reminding the world every sound Ozzy made was a call to those struggling in darkness. A whisper that said, "I know you hurt, but you are not alone." And because of that, He didn't just sing to live. He lived to save a generation from silence. And when we listen in the final quiet, there we hear the immortal echo of a soul shattered, but never vanished. And as the stage lights slowly dimmed, as the electric guitars faded into faint echoes like a dying memory, people truly began to hear Ozzy Osbourne's screams, not with their ears, but with their hearts. He didn't scream to shock, he screamed to survive. From the moment he was born in a poor house in Birmingham, fate had already branded him with the mark of being forgotten. A child lost too soon, imprisoned at 17, dismissed, mocked, and discarded by the powerful elites of the music industry. But Ozzy didn't climb to the top like other artists. He crawled with a broken body through cuts, blood, and fear. He didn't have the look of a star. He wasn't trained. Yet every time he stepped on stage with Black Sabbath, the pain of a generation found its voice. He didn't perform, he confessed. No pretense, no embellishment. Moments that stunned the world, like the infamous bat-biting incident in 1982, were never theatrics. They were simply Ozzy surviving the madness within himself. For him, the stage was a sanctuary, the last lifeline in a vast ocean of confusion. He sang with a bloodied throat, with a body weakened by surgery, through the days when Parkinson stole every step, but he refused to stop. When asked why he kept going, he whispered, "Because I owe it to them." And you know what? He truly owed his fans, but they owed him too. Owed a man who had fallen countless times so they could stand. Owed a soul that burned to its core so they could glimpse the light amidst their own darkness. After nearly dying repeatedly from alcohol, drugs, and invisible sorrow, Ozzy rose in the 90s, not as a dark prince, but as a survivor, a nightmare that still sang. Hits like "No More Tears" were more than music. They were painful prayers from one who hit rock bottom, but still fought to swim upward. With Ozfest, he opened doors for society's outcasts, kids who once saw themselves as monsters and said, "I'm like you, but I'm still here." And when the reality show The Osbournes made him a household name, people saw clumsy Ozzy, forgetting lyrics, laughing like a child, yet never forgetting the pain. He called himself a warning, not a role model. But it was precisely this brutal honesty that made him something no academy, accolade, or studio could ever create. A living icon of brokenness and resilience. His screams may have quieted now, but don't be mistaken, that is not the end. It is a ringing bell, reminding the world. Every sound Ozzy made was a call to those struggling in darkness, a whisper that said, "I know you hurt, but you are not alone." And because of that, he didn't just sing to live. He lived to save a generation from silence. And when we listen in the final quiet, there we hear the immortal echo of a soul shattered, but never vanished. As the stage lights of Ozzy Osbourne's life began to fade and his once thunderous voice softened into fragile whispers, the world witnessed not just an ending, but a profound transformation, deeper than any encore. These final years were not merely the closing chapter of a rock star's career. They were the last pages in the story of a man who poured every ounce of his soul into music, pain, and the countless souls who saw their own chaos reflected in his. By the time he reached his 70s, Ozzy's body had become a battlefield. Diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2003, though only publicly revealed in 2020, he endured a slow and merciless decline. Each step grew heavier, each breath more labored. He underwent multiple spinal surgeries, battled relentless nerve pain, and often collapsed behind the scenes after performances. Yet, he persisted, not out of obligation, but because he felt indebted to the fans who stood by him through every crash, relapse, and resurrection. His last act of defiance was not a grand stadium tour. but the haunting intimacy of vulnerability. Near the end of his public life, Ozzy released the album Patient No. 9, a work born not of ambition, but desperation. Every lyric was a farewell, every note the weight of a man singing against the silence awaiting him. "I'm not afraid to die," he confessed once. "I'm more afraid of being forgotten." The album was recorded when he could barely stand. Friends recalled moments when he sang seated, clutching the microphone stand like a lifeline. Sometimes he couldn't finish a take without tears, a producer said. Still, he sang. Still, he gave. For Ozzy, music was never performance. It was exorcism. On July 5th, at what would be his final public appearance tied to performance, Ozzy surprised fans at a festival in Birmingham. He didn't sing. He couldn't. But he stood trembling and defiant before a sea of fans chanting his name. His tear-rimmed eyes spoke what his voice no longer could. "Thank you. I'm still here." That moment wasn't a concert. It was a farewell disguised as a wave. More than a gesture, it fulfilled a final wish he quietly carried through decline, to stand before his fans one last time and look into their eyes. It was never about glory or legacy, only gratitude. Sharon later shared, he wanted to say goodbye on his own terms, and he did. That farewell gave him peace. Returning home emotionally spent but calm inside, he told his son Jack, "I did what I needed to do." In those moments, there was no regret, only completion. For a life lived in chaos, that brief stillness, surrounded by love and devotion, was closure. He gave everything to his fans, and they gave him strength to keep going. Till the end. In private, the battle was even more excruciating. He confided to Sharon that he often felt like a ghost trapped in his own body, watching the world move on without him. Yet each morning, Sharon said, he found some reason, however small, to push forward. Whether a fan's letter, a riff from a dream, or the laughter of Kelly in the next room. Ozzy never sanitized his past. In his final interviews, he spoke with raw honesty about regrets, the people he hurt, the years lost and to addiction, the father he failed to be. "I wasn't always good," he admitted, "but I always tried to come back better." And come back, he did, again and again, until his body no longer could keep pace with his spirit. As days shortened and hospital visits increased, his family spent nearly every moment by his side. Jack, Kelly, and Amy took turns reading letters from fans, many crediting Ozzy's music with saving their lives. Sharon never left his bedside. She was the last voice he heard each night, whispering words only they understood. There is a heartbreak that defies words, a grief too vast for sound. When Ozzy Osbourne passed away, it was not just the loss of a musician. It was the extinguishing of a fire that warmed millions in their darkest hours. His pain became our comfort. His brokenness gave us permission to be whole. And though he died in silence, the echo of his life still roars. In every metal guitar's scream, every misfit finding solace in snarling lyrics, every soul choosing to rise one more time. That is Ozzy's legacy. That is the soul that refused to die. It didn't feel like news. It felt like a rupture, a tear in the fabric of a world that had always expected him to outlive the darkness he carried so well. Ozzy Osbourne had died, and something primal shifted. Grief didn't trickle in, it thundered. Cities became shrines, strangers became mourners, and music, his music, became the only language people could agree on. In Birmingham, where his scream was born, rain mingled with candlelight as black roses and vinyl offerings covered the streets beneath a mural that suddenly felt sacred. A scrap of paper taped to the wall read, "You made it okay to hurt." In Los Angeles, silence pooled around his star as men in suits and teens in leather knelt shoulder to shoulder, clutching old ticket stubs, faded photos, memories too heavy to carry alone. From Sweden to Brazil, radio stations went dark, then played him loud. Spotify and Apple Music surged by nearly 1,000%, but it wasn't numbers people felt. It was resurrection. No More Tears, Dreamer, War Pigs. They weren't tracks anymore. They were farewells. On YouTube, his voice cut through decades in a grainy 1983 performance of Bark at the Moon. A resurfaced interview from 1992 circled like gospel. Music always saved me. Fans flooded the comments not just with love, but survival stories, marriages ruined, relapses reversed, ledges stepped back from. Ozzy didn't romanticize pain, one wrote. He lived there, and he showed us the exits. The hashtag #, thank you. Ozzy wrapped around the globe, a digital vigil ignited by strangers who had never met, but all owed him something. From Hetfield's confession, "He was our beginning," to Post Malone's quiet reverence, to Sharon's trembling caption beneath a backstage photo, he gave you everything, especially when it broke him. People gathered where they could, parks, churches, rooftops. In Tokyo, hundreds stood in stillness holding candles. In Berlin, a church rang its bells 13 times, one for each Sabbath album he fronted. Outside his home in LA, the ground filled with flowers, broken guitars, letters, tattoos sketched in ink and pain. A mural appeared overnight. He screamed so we could be heard. And in the stillness that followed, his family spoke, not with press statements, but with ache. Jack wrote, "He wasn't just my father. He was the noise I needed to keep going." Kelly posted a photo of herself as a child in his arms. "You made the darkness beautiful. I'll never forget how." Churches lit candles. Tattoo parlors gave ink for free. Mental health forums filled with posts that began with, "I wouldn't be here if not for..." One teenager wrote, "I was standing on a bridge, then came, 'Mama, I'm coming home.' And I did." Industry giants moved fast. Exhibits planned, documentaries pitched, tributes at Wembley drawn in blueprints and blood. In Birmingham, a street may soon bear his name. 500,000 have already asked that he be knighted, posthumously. But the loudest honors weren't broadcast. They happened in private, a woman screaming lyrics into a steering wheel, a boy discovering Paranoid for the first time, a hospice nurse humming changes to a dying man who smiled for the first time in weeks. Ozzy didn't just change music, he changed the people who needed it to survive. He wasn't edited, he wasn't polished, he was real and raw and ruinous in the most healing way possible. In a world that filters everything, Ozzy Osbourne was the one thing that didn't blink. He didn't just teach us how to headbang, a fan whispered in Birmingham. He taught us how to stay alive. And now, even in death, his voice doesn't fade. It trembles on, through speakers, through scars, through the silence he left behind. After the world lost Ozzy Osbourne, no tribute felt heavier than the silence of the woman who knew him best. Sharon Osbourne wasn't just the wife beside the throne. She was the fortress that held him up when fame tried to tear him down. For more than 40 years, she was his war shield, his voice of reason, his rage in armor, and his sanctuary when the noise got too loud. Their love was volcanic, imperfect, but terrifyingly true. And now, with Ozzy gone, Sharon isn't retreating into grief. She's turning it into legacy. In private, she grieves in fragments, holding old photos, rereading the notes he left behind, staring at the empty spot beside her in bed. She still sets his coffee mug out each morning, black, no sugar, just as he liked it. Not because she forgets, but because forgetting would hurt more. She walks past his slippers by the bed and can't move them. His cologne sits unopened on the shelf like a ghost in glass. But in public she's steel, orchestrating a Wembley tribute concert that won't be a funeral, but a thunderous resurrection of sound. No velvet speeches, no sanitized versions, just raw chords and louder-than-death guitars from the artist Ozzy, lifted and inspired. That concert is just the opening riff. Sharon is also building something permanent, the Ozzy Osbourne Legacy Foundation. Its mission isn't charity, it's continuation. Mental health, addiction recovery, music access, for kids no one listens to. These aren't just causes, they're battlefields Ozzy bled on. And Sharon is making sure no one forgets it. At home, she's finishing a memoir, half confession, half love letter, focused on Ozzy's final 10 years. The sick nights, the broken bones, the laughter in hospital rooms, the whispered promises in the dark. She wrote everything. She always did. One entry reads, "If I can't scream, I'll whisper. But I won't leave in silence." That was Ozzy, and she's making sure his scream never fades. Alongside the book, a documentary is underway with Sharon unlocking their private archives. Footage no one's seen, Ozzy humming at sunrise, dancing barefoot with Kelly, weeping in her arms after reading a fan's letter. This isn't the bat-biting myth. It's the man who couldn't sleep without her heartbeat nearby. Some nights, she still plays his voicemail, just to hear the pause before he says her name. Her grief isn't quiet, it's purposeful. She's not building a memorial, she's building a mirror so the world can finally see the man she loved without makeup, without myth, just marrow-deep truth. He didn't want sainthood, she once said. He wanted to be remembered honestly. And so, she mourns through action, concerts, foundations, memoirs, each one a fragment of the fire she refuses to let go out. When the guitars go silent and the film reels end, her work won't stop. Because Ozzy's story doesn't end in a eulogy. It echoes. In every kid screaming lyrics in a basement. In every addict choosing to live one more day. In every quiet moment, Sharon sits alone in the dark, hearing his laughter in the silence, and letting that silence become music again. Long before he became a legend, Ozzy Osbourne was a defiant spark in a world desperate for order. He didn't wait for permission, he rewrote the rules, and when the noise of rebellion met the silence of conformity, he chose to scream. What followed wasn't just fame, it was a cultural uprising. Few in pop culture commanded such loyalty, reverence, and controversy. Ozzy wasn't molded to be a star, he shattered every mold. As frontman of Black Sabbath, he didn't just perform, he ignited a movement. Their 1970 debut divided critics but lit a fire in fans. Tracks like War Pigs, Paranoid, and Iron Man weren't songs. They were war cries for the disillusioned. Ozzy, raw-throated and unfiltered, became their voice. He turned imperfection into power. His reach stretched beyond stages. For 5 decades, he influenced film, fashion, television, and academia. He was studied, mocked, idolized, but never replicated. Prince of Darkness wasn't a title, it was truth. He gave voice to misfits, strength to the broken. His music didn't just reflect chaos, it baptized listeners and pulled them back up. When he died, it wasn't just a genre that wept, it was the world. In Tokyo, Berlin, São Paulo, and Birmingham, people didn't just mourn, they gave thanks. Birmingham plans a monument and a renamed public square, Osborne Yard. In LA, black roses buried his Walk of Fame star. Across London, LED billboards bore his silhouette and the words, "Thank you, Ozzy." In Tokyo, a teenager looped "Goodbye to Romance," whispering, I found myself in his voice. A knighthood petition soared past 500,000 signatures in 48 hours. Supporters called it overdue, a cultural debt. The UK's Culture Department issued a rare tribute, calling Ozzy a pillar of Britain's influence. The BBC aired a two-part special. ITV ran a 24-hour tribute. In Cleveland, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame began curating a wing of his legacy: lyrics, outfits, unseen footage. But the most powerful tributes came from the people. Fans in recovery centers credited his music with saving them. Therapists noted his lyrics helped patients speak their pain. One counselor said, "He gave my patients permission to scream." Universities launched courses on Ozzy's impact, exploring how metal gave identity to post-industrial youth. Professors called him a translator of emotional survival. Art schools studied his rebellion against performative masculinity. And at Wembley Stadium, the cathedral of rock and roll, plans for the tribute concert of the decade are underway. With a capacity of 90,000 and a legacy of hosting music's giants, the venue will roar once more for Ozzy. Artists he lifted alongside new voices he inspired will unite in a farewell of thunder. The concert, set for this coming fall, will be a historic convergence of generations. It will feature immersive stage designs echoing his most iconic tours, a holographic tribute segment using never-before-seen backstage, moments and orchestral arrangements of his most emotional ballads, played by a youth symphony he once supported. Because Ozzy wasn't just music, he was movement, map mirror. Through his chaos, we found chords. Through his pain, we found purpose. Through his scream, we found ourselves. He didn't just belong to metal. He belonged to memory, etched not in platinum records, but in the pulse of generations who found courage in his noise. And memory, unlike fame, refuses to fade. Though the world has bid farewell to Ozzy Osbourne, he has never truly left us. Some souls don't fade with time. They merge into the very heartbeat of history, into every lingering guitar riff that echoes in the hearts of those once broken by life, who found the strength to rise again through his voice. Ozzy's final bow wasn't a period, it was a gateway into legend, where sound needs no speakers to be heard, and legacy requires no breath to endure. In the days following his passing, people didn't just mourn. They embarked on a profound reflection on what it meant to live in an era graced by his presence. He didn't merely compose music, he crafted a blueprint for survival. He was a living testament to resilience, transforming scars into armor and pain into faith. Millions, from lonely children clutching headphones in dark rooms to hearts battered by life, found in Ozzy something the world had never offered: permission to break, to be loud, to be imperfect, and still be worthy of love. His legacy isn't just platinum records, it's the souls who saved themselves in the darkness, guided by his voice. Bands like Ghost, Slipknot, Avenged Sevenfold, and Bring Me the Horizon don't just idolize Ozzy, they carry fragments of his rebellious spirit in their DNA. The madness and profound messages Ozzy conveyed have become the truest measures of courage and identity, and no one has ever replicated that. Because Ozzy wasn't a template, he was a spiritual force, a scarred prophet for the misfits. Now, a quote spreads across memorials and farewells, stating clearly, he didn't just leave behind music. He left a philosophy of life. Be loud, be hurt, be fearless, be yourself. These words aren't merely for tombstones. They are sacred calls to all who have ever felt they didn't belong. Ozzy taught us that weakness isn't failure. Madness doesn't mean being lost. And music isn't just entertainment. It's a weapon for survival, for resistance, for self-love. Even as his body began to betray him, his hands trembling, pain overwhelming, his voice never lost its power. He once said, If I die on stage, let it be because I'm doing the one thing I truly love. And though his final performance was months before his passing, we know he ended his life doing exactly what he chose, giving everything to his audience, holding nothing back. Today, universities are incorporating his life into music and pop culture curricula. Therapy groups quote his words as beacons, to name the darkness within souls. And in every home where Paranoid or Mama, I'm Coming Home still plays, Ozzy remains the breath of both pain and rebirth. What renders his legacy immortal isn't just his achievements, but what he gave, a roadmap to wholeness for those shattered without needing to be unbroken to start anew. He didn't offer perfection, he offered truth. He taught us how to scream without apology, to move forward without hiding our wounds, to love fiercely, even when darkness still resides within. That's why he transcended all frameworks, eras, genres, titles. Ozzy didn't just build a metal house, he infused it with soul. And now, that house stands stronger than ever, sheltering those still trembling, yet choosing to sing. As long as there are people daring to choose raw truth over glamour, soul over display, fire over fear, Ozzy Osbourne will never fade. His voice will live on in every rebellious whisper, every survival song, every heroic anthem that refuses to die in silence. Therefore, the final note isn't silence. It's a legacy, eternal, unyielding, unforgettable. If Ozzy's life was a blazing hill that burned itself to illuminate the world, then Sharon was the silent wind, ensuring that flame never extinguished. For over 4 decades, she wasn't just the wife behind the stage. She was the last wall against collapse, the final one remaining when all others had left. She didn't seek glory. She needed Ozzy to live, even if just for one more day, one more stage, one more song. In the silent hours after he closed his eyes, others sought the spotlight, while Sharon quietly gathered each fragment of memory, holding them with her entire soul. Every replayed song, every written tribute, every established charity were painful heartbeats she sent back to the world as farewells. Ozzy may be a symbol of darkness, but the final light keeping him from vanishing is her. Sharon isn't just a life partner. She is the second heartbeat keeping his soul alive, even when the world has gone silent. And now, if you've ever been healed by a melody, ever wept over a lyric, ever survived thanks to Ozzy's voice, please share it. Don't let that memory lie dormant within you. Illuminate it, like a lamp in the deep night, so he remains with us, amidst the echoes that never fade. Because Ozzy's voice lives on, not just in speakers, not just in memorials, but in every heart that has never been silent. Speak it out. Keep him alive, just as he lived, fierce, painful, and never willing to be silent.